Hi, I'm Miran Hayes. On Christmas Eve, my parents swung open the grand front doors of our Hillsborough estate and tossed my single suitcase onto the icy marble steps. My younger sister, Alara, stood just behind them, arms crossed, grinning like she'd won the lottery. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," she said. I dragged my suitcase through thick, freezing fog. No money, no car, nothing left but the long cashmere coat keeping me warm. I collapsed on a snow-dusted park bench inside the gated neighborhood, shaking so hard my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. Then she appeared, an elderly woman, barefoot, skin tinged purple, silver hair whipping in the wind. She looked as if the cold had already claimed her. Without thinking, I stood up, removed my only coat, and wrapped it around her shivering shoulders. She took my frozen hands, looked straight at me, and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than diamonds." Then she vanished into the fog. Exactly 1 hour later, 19 black luxury sedans rolled silently onto the street, blocking the entire way. The same woman stepped out of the central car. Her face was the same, but now she wore a floor-length camel coat, her hair perfectly styled and diamonds flashing at her wrist. She walked directly to me, smiled, and said one line, "I've been watching long enough to know exactly who you really are. If you've ever been discarded by those meant to love you, drop your city or been there in the comments. I know I'm not alone. Trust me, what happens next will astonish you." I was still reeling from the layoff email that landed at 10 a.m., another round of restructuring at the San Francisco ad agency I'd dedicated 6 years to. I packed my desk plant into my 12-year-old Honda Civic and headed south on 101 toward Hillsborough. 32 miles, 47 minutes if traffic cooperated. It didn't. I'd already called Mom. "I just need to crash for a couple weeks while I figure things out," I said. She sounded distracted, mentioned dinner at 7, and hung up. When I arrived, the house looked like a magazine cover. A 2-story foyer lined with fur, white orchids everywhere, caterers in black ties setting a table for 20. Dad, Richard, was uncorking a 2005 Dom Perignon like it was Tuesday. Mom, Margaret, was fastening a new South Sea pearl choker that hadn't been there last month. And Alara, 27, twirled in a backless red silk dress, flashing a 6-carat diamond like she'd waited her whole life for this moment. Derek, my ex of 4 years, had his arm around her waist. I dropped my keys in the bowl and tried to smile. "Hey everyone, bad day at work." That was all I managed. Alara spun, eyes wide with mock concern. "Oh my God, again?" She gasped loud enough for the caterers to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" She turned to Mom. "Remember when she got fired from the startup in Soma for not being a team player?" Mom's lips tightened. Dad didn't even glance up from his champagne. My face burned. It had been a reduction in force. They'd let go of the entire creative team. Alara waved her new ring toward me. Derek gave that same smug half-smile he used 2 years ago when he ended things. "It's not you, it's timing." Finally, Dad set his glass down. "Miran, we need to talk." He didn't motion me to sit. He never did when it was bad news. Last month, he'd amended the family trust. Every cent, $38 million, was now in Alara's name. Irrevocable, notarized, filed. I was 32, he said, capable of standing on my own. Mom added, "We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results." I stood there, mouth open. My own parents had just legally disinherited me while I was still standing in their foyer. Alara pulled out her phone, already recording. "This is gold. Big sis comes home broke on Christmas Eve." I looked at Dad. "You're serious?" He met my gaze for the first time all night. Cold. Final. 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back tomorrow for the rest if you make an appointment. Mom didn't look at me. She adjusted a gold ornament on the tree. I walked upstairs on autopilot, packing jeans, sweaters, a laptop, and toiletries. Everything else, books, yearbooks, framed Stanford diploma, would have to wait. When I returned, Alara was live on Instagram. And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad suitcase. Dad opened the door himself. Fog rolled thick, temperature dropping below freezing. I stepped over the threshold. Alara called out, "Sweet as poison. Merry Christmas, Miran. Don't freeze." The door clicked shut. In under 30 minutes, I went from daughter to trespasser in the only home I'd ever known. I stood on the marble steps, one suitcase at my feet, wearing the only warm thing I still owned. Everything went silent except the pounding in my ears. I started walking because standing still felt worse. The wheels of my suitcase rattled over perfect pavement. Each mansion I passed reminded me I no longer belonged anywhere. My fingers were numb. I kept thinking, this can't be real. Any minute, Mom will call me back. But no footsteps, no door opening, only cold. Eventually, I reached a small public garden by the old Episcopal church, one iron bench under a working street lamp. I sat down, dropped the suitcase, and let the tears come. I cried for the little girl hiding under the Christmas tree, for every birthday when Alara got the bigger present, for believing that if I worked harder, achieved more, they'd notice me. It didn't matter. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Alara. Tears froze on my cheeks. I hugged my knees, trying to figure out how I'd survive the night, let alone life. That's when I heard the slow scrape of bare feet on concrete. I looked up and saw her, the elderly woman from earlier, shuffling toward the bench. Silver hair tangled, shoulders hunched against the wind. Her skin looked nearly translucent under the lamp. She stopped a few feet away and spoke, voice rough from cold. "Young lady, do you know if any shelters still have room tonight? I've been walking from Burlingame. Everything's full." I wiped my face quickly. "I'm sorry, I don't have anywhere either." She studied me for a long moment, eyes sharp despite exhaustion, then lowered herself carefully onto the bench, keeping distance. I noticed her feet, bare, already turning purple. Something inside me cracked. Here was someone who had even less than I did, and yet she asked politely instead of demanding. Shame washed over me for feeling sorry for myself. Without a word, I stood, removed the coat that was keeping me alive, and draped it over her shoulders. She looked startled, then closed her eyes as the warmth hit. Her thin, veined hands pulled the coat tighter. Tears glistened in her pale blue eyes. "What's your name, child?" she asked. "Moran," I whispered. She repeated it softly, like tasting something precious. "Thank you, Moran." Then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my frozen hands in hers, squeezed once, and held my gaze. No words, just understanding passing between two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers anymore. After what felt like forever, she let go, stood with steadiness, and gave me the smallest smile before slowly disappearing into the night. I sat back down, colder than ever, teeth chattering. But for the first time since the door closed, the ache in my chest felt lighter. Giving away the last thing I had somehow gave me something I didn't know I was missing. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap pine cleaner. I'd been staring at job listings for hours when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Moran Hayes?" The woman's voice was crisp, professional, with a faint East Coast accent. "This is Grace O'Neill, on behalf of Mrs. Eleanor Calloway. She'd like to meet you immediately." I laughed. It sounded like a prank. Who is this really? No answer. Then, "Mrs. Calloway will explain everything. A car is waiting outside room 112. I looked through the peephole. 19 identical black BMW 760s lined the cracked parking lot like a presidential motorcade. The lead car's rear door opened by itself. I grabbed my keys and walked out, wearing the same jeans and hoodie I'd had on for 2 days. She was waiting in the middle car, the woman from the bench. Hair flawless, low bun, camel hair coat cinched at the waist, red heels catching the sunlight. She looked ageless, elegant. "Etan," she said gently, as if we were old friends. The car door closed behind me. 20 minutes later, the gates opened to a 1920s Tudor mansion on a quiet cul-de-sac in Atherton, hidden behind redwoods and a 10-foot hedge. I had driven past this street 1,000 times and never noticed it. Inside smelled of cedar and roses. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a private lake. She motioned for me to sit on a cream sofa that probably cost more than my car. A butler poured tea neither of us touched. "My full name is Eleanor Calloway," she began. "My late husband founded Calloway Commercial Realty. When he passed 12 years ago, I took the company private and turned the profits into the Calloway Family Foundation. We own or finance over 400 million square feet of office and retail space across the country. The foundation distributes roughly $120 million a year." I stared, unable to process the numbers. "Every Christmas Eve for 25 years, she continued, I do one thing the same. I leave the estate dressed as someone who has nothing. No security, no wallet, no phone. I walk until I find someone who still has a heart when they believe no one is watching. Most years I go home disappointed. This year, I found you." She explained that after I walked away, her security team had observed me from a distance for 48 hours. They watched me check into the motel, eat vending machine food, apply to 50 jobs, cry in the shower, and never once try to find out who the homeless woman was, or brag about the deed. "You're the first person in 15 years, she said quietly, who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without expecting anything back. I need to know if that was a fluke or who you really are." She walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. "I have no children, no heirs. When I'm gone, strangers will decide where my money goes. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be thrown away to decide how to help the next person in need." She turned to me. I'm offering you a room here, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end, you are the person I believe you are, the foundation becomes yours to run. Not a gift, a responsibility. I could only manage. Why me? Her eyes sharpened, because I know what it feels like to sit on a freezing bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my father did it to me. She promised that if given the chance, she'd make sure anyone who chose right wouldn't stay lost. She extended her hand. So, Miran Hayes, will you come home with me? I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new bedroom was larger than my parents' entire downstairs. With French doors opening onto a rose garden, I could actually smell from bed. Grace O'Neill, tall and silver-haired, handed me a leather binder the thickness of a phone book. "Welcome to boot camp," she said. The first month was brutal. 6 a.m. runs around the lake with Eleanor's former Navy SEAL trainer. By 7:30, breakfast meetings where I learned to read complex tax returns faster than most CPAs. From 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., I sat beside Eleanor in board meetings at the foundation offices on Sand Hill Road, taking notes while billionaires argued over impact metrics. Evenings were spent dissecting 20 years of grant archives until my eyes burned. Eleanor didn't want another wealthy heir playing philanthropist. She wanted someone who could turn money into meaningful change without wasting a cent. Her favorite line became, "We don't give fish. We don't even give fishing lessons. We buy the whole river and make sure everyone can eat forever." She enrolled me in Stanford's Graduate School of Business executive program for nonprofit leaders. Full tuition, no questions asked. 3 nights a week, I drove 5 miles to campus, sitting in classrooms with executives twice my age, learning how to measure outcomes instead of intentions. Weekends meant site visits, battered women's shelters in East Oakland, after-school programs in East San Jose, veteran housing projects in the Central Valley. I interviewed mothers who had escaped abuse with nothing but their children and a single bag of clothes. I listened to teenagers explain how one safe place to do homework kept them out of gangs. Every story left a mark. Back at the estate, Grace drilled me on governance, how to handle rogue board members, say no to a senator's pet project without losing federal matching funds, fire a grantee caught embezzling without triggering a PR nightmare. I rewrote the entire grant application process. Shorter forms, faster decisions, mandatory site visits within 30 days of approval. Eleanor reviewed every draft in red ink, making me defend each change in front of the full board. There were nights I fell asleep at the kitchen island, face pressed against spreadsheets. Mornings I cried in the shower, feeling like an imposter who would never be enough. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered the freezing bench with nothing, and I kept going. June arrived, hot and sudden. One Thursday morning, Eleanor sent a text. "Library, now." I expected another 12-hour strategy session. Instead, she was alone, sunlight streaming through stained glass, holding a single folder. She didn't sit. She slid the folder across the mahogany table and remained standing. Inside was an employment agreement on thick cream paper. Title, President and CEO, Callaway Family Foundation. Reporting line, directly to the board, Eleanor until she decided otherwise. Base salary, $195,000. Equity, 3% in the foundation's endowment, valued just under $4 billion. Authority, full decision-making over all programs starting year 3, subject only to fiduciary duty. I stared, speechless. "I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat," Eleanor said. "Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes when a camera is watching. I watched you for 5 straight months. I watched you fight for a domestic violence shelter every banker wanted to defund because the numbers looked messy. I watched you sit on a folding chair in Oakland until midnight, listening to a 17-year-old girl explain why she couldn't go home. I watched you rewrite a 70-page policy manual because one paragraph would have left transgender kids without beds. You have the mind I need and the heart I lost long ago. The foundation is yours to run. I'll stay on the board to keep the old man in line, but day to day, the river belongs to you now." I tried to say thank you, but no words came out. She waved it off. "Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish the endowment tax module first." I laughed through tears and signed. That night, we opened a 1982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace, just the two of us watching the sun drop behind the redwoods. To the girl who had every reason to become bitter and chose kindness anyway, she toasted. And to the woman who refused to let one good deed stay invisible, I replied. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. October came, smelling like wet leaves and money in San Francisco. I was in my corner office on the 22nd floor of 300 California Street, reviewing final numbers for the second home campus, when Grace knocked. Your sister and Derek Whitaker are downstairs. No appointment. My stomach dropped. I told security to send them up. They walked in, looking rehearsed. Alara wore a modest navy sheath dress instead of her usual bodycon. Derek traded his hoodie and sneakers for a navy suit that almost fit. Both carried tight smiles, clearly practiced. Alara spoke first, voice soft, eyes shiny. "Moran, we've been awful. I'm sorry for everything. Christmas Eve, my posts, all of it." Derek nodded. "We're getting married next spring and trying to do things right this time." I stayed behind my desk, hands folded, waiting. Alara continued. "Dad's in trouble. Some investments went south. He and Mom might lose the house. And Derek's new company just needs $2 million to close the seed round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death." I raised an eyebrow. "Which part is life or death? The mortgage or your valuation?" Derek laughed awkwardly. "Look, you're big time now, but blood is blood, right? $2 million is nothing to the foundation." I leaned back. "What happened to the $38 million our trust fund you took last December?" Alara blinked. "We diversified. Crypto, NFTs, a few angel deals Derek's friends were running. It was supposed to 10x. Then FTX collapsed. Luna went to zero. Most of it's gone." I opened the folder Grace had placed on my desk. Bank statements, Forbes articles. 87% gone in 11 months. You bought Lamborghinis, put deposits on a Miami condo, paid influencers to promote coins. That's not a downturn. That's arson. Alara went red, pulling out her phone to record as security stepped in. "You ungrateful." "No," I said, standing. "This foundation exists for people who never had a safety net, not for people who destroyed theirs and now want mine. You're not getting a dime. Not today, not ever." Within minutes, 3 paparazzi vans and a local gossip blogger waited outside the glass doors. Alara went full performance tears. The video hit TikTok in 20 minutes. "My billionaire sister won't help our parents. Family first is toxic sibling." 10 million views in 6 hours. Then the internet did what the internet does best. Old classmates posted photos of her bullying me in high school. The Christmas Eve Instagram live resurfaced. Former nannies shared stories. Public sentiment flipped overnight. Derek's startup deck leaked. Turns out the AI elderly care company was mostly vaporware. Investors ghosted. Tara's wedding planner canceled. Social media accounts were crushed. I didn't post a single word. Grace poured me a finger of scotch that night. "Poetic justice tastes better when you don't have to lift a finger," she said. "No," I replied. "It tastes like closure." November brought persistent fog over San Francisco. The news broke one Tuesday. Pacific Crest Capital collapses. $4.2 billion Ponzi scheme unravels. My father had moved every remaining dollar, including the mortgage refinance, home equity line, and even Mom's jewelry, into the fund 6 months earlier, hoping the guaranteed 18% return would recover their losses. The FBI raided the offices in Newport Beach the same week. The founder was already on a yacht off Cabo. 30 days later, the foreclosure notice appeared on the Hillsborough Mansion's front door. No bidders showed. The bank took title. Richard, Margaret, and Alara moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon on Story Road in East San Jose. Rent, $20,900 a month, everything they could afford. After the bankruptcy filing, Alara's credit cards maxed at $247,000, mostly on handbags and retail therapy. Collection agencies called nonstop. One rainy Thursday morning, they showed up at the foundation unannounced. Security called me. I told them to let the 3 in. Dad looked 20 years older, hair gone white, shoulders curved inward, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big. Mom's hair was cut short, dyed cheaply, and Alara looked small and stripped of her designer armor, eyes red and clutching a knockoff tote like a lifeline. We met in the small glass conference room on the 22nd floor. No water, no coffee. Dad spoke first, voice cracking on every word. "Miran, you're my daughter. We know we hurt you. We don't deserve anything, but we have nowhere else to turn. The apartment lease ends in 6 weeks. We'll be on the street." Mom stared at the table, twisting a tissue. Alara finally looked up. "Please, just enough to get a fresh start. We'll sign anything. Never ask again." I opened a slim black folder and pushed 3 business cards toward them. Marcus Chen, certified financial planner, specializing in post-bankruptcy recovery, financial literacy and debt management program, free 8-week course at the East San Jose Community Center, funded by the foundation, local mental health support, National Alliance on Mental Illness California Crisis Hotline, and a sliding scale therapist. This is what the Callaway Foundation offers to strangers who lost everything through no fault of their own, I said steadily. The same help we give anyone walking in broke and scared. Dad's hand trembled as he reached for the cards. That's it? After 32 years? That's all you have for your own father? I stood. You had choices. You chose to rewrite the trust. You chose to chase returns that sounded too good to be true. You chose to stay silent when Alara humiliated me. Those were your decisions, not mine. Mom finally looked at me, tears streaming. We were wrong. We're so sorry. I met her eyes. I believe you're sorry now. But sorry doesn't rebuild a life. Work does. Courage does. Taking responsibility does. Alara sobbed loudly. You're enjoying this. You want us to suffer. I walked to the door, holding it open. No, I just refuse to pay for your suffering anymore. Security escorted them out. Dad never looked back. Mom whispered one last, I'm sorry. Alara said nothing for the first time in her life. I passed within 2 feet of them without breaking stride. The massive redwood doors of second home opened automatically. Warm light spilled onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. The doors closed with a soft, final click. I never looked back. Not because I hated them, but because I finally understood. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it simply means walking through a new one and letting the old one stay shut. Inside, a little boy in a Spider-Man jacket tugged my sleeve. Are you the lady who built this place? He asked. I knelt to meet his eyes. I'm one of them, I said. He handed me a dandelion he'd picked from the courtyard. For you, because you gave us a home. I took the flower and smiled, for the first time in a long time, genuinely. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside second home, the future had begun. The sky over East Palo Alto was steel gray that morning. Second home rose like a promise. 4 stories of glass and redwood wrapped around a courtyard where children ran between planters of rosemary and kale. 3,000 people filled the plaza. Families who would live there, donors, city council members, networks, even the governor ready to cut the ribbon. I stood backstage in a simple black suit, heart hammering louder than the marching band warming up. Gray squeezed my hand once. Eleanor, elegant in winter white, gave a small nod from the front row. This was the project I had poured myself into. 200 permanent supportive apartments, on-site medical clinic, job training center, preschool, rooftop farm, and a policy ensuring no one would ever be turned away for lack of paperwork. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd roared when my name was called. I walked to the podium, the microphone heavier than any trust document I'd ever signed. I looked out over the sea of faces. Near the back, almost hidden behind a column, stood Richard, Margaret, and Alara. Dad wore an old navy peacoat hanging loosely. Mom clutched a paper cup of coffee as if it might disappear. Alara had cut her hair short, looking smaller without the armor of designer labels. I let the silence settle for 3 full seconds. 1 year ago tonight, I began, voice steady. I was thrown out of the only home I'd ever known with 1 suitcase and nowhere to go. I learned that night what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. A ripple ran through the crowd. Cameras zoomed. I also learned something else on a freezing park bench, I continued. Real family isn't DNA. Real family is the stranger who sees you when you're invisible. Real family is the hand that reaches when you have nothing left to give in return. I gestured toward the building behind me. This is second home. 200 families will never again sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Kids will never again do homework in the back seat because the lights got shut off. Every person who walks through these doors will be told the same thing I needed to hear that Christmas Eve. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. The applause started slow, then exploded. Phones rose like a wave of light. I waited for it to crest, then spoke softer so every microphone strained to catch it. Tonight, we open these doors for everyone who has ever been told they don't belong, especially those who were told it by the people who were supposed to love them most. I looked directly at the 3 figures in the back. Dad's shoulders shook. Mom covered her mouth. Alara stared at the ground. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply held their gaze for 1 heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then I stepped away from the podium. The governor cut the ribbon. The marching band struck up. Children rushed forward with flowers. Reporters shouted questions I pretended not to hear. I walked down the steps through the crowd, parting like water, heading for the main entrance. Richard tried to step forward. Muran. I kept walking. Not fast, not slow, just forward. Mom reached out a hand that never touched me. Alara opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in her life, she said nothing at all. The massive redwood doors of second home opened automatically as I approached. Warm light spilled onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. The doors closed behind me with a soft, final sound. I never looked back. Not because I hated them, but because I finally understood. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it means walking through a new one and letting the old one stay shut. Inside, a little boy tugged my sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" I knelt to meet his eyes. "I'm one of them," I said. He handed me a dandelion. "For you, because you gave us a home." I took the flower, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside Second Home, the future had begun, and I finally knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be.